Good day. This is the Corrupt True Crime Podcast, and I'm Charlie Cruz. Today's episode is about one of aviation's most enduring mysteries, the disappearance of legendary pilot Amelia Earhart over the vast Pacific Ocean, and how modern scientists are now tracing faint echoes from the past that might finally reveal what happened on that fateful day in 1937. The twin-engine Lockheed Electra roared down the runway in Lae, New Guinea, so heavy with fuel it barely cleared the trees at the end. Inside, Amelia Earhart, the most famous woman in the world, turned her aircraft toward a speck of land 2,500 miles away across empty ocean. It was a dot on the map, less than 2 miles long, surrounded by 6 million square miles of nothing. Find it, and she'd complete the longest flight around the world ever attempted. Miss it, and the Pacific would swallow her whole. 18 hours later, her voice crackled through the radio. "We must be on you, but cannot see you. Gas is running low." Then silence, and one of the greatest mysteries of the 20th century was born. Now here's the thing about Amelia Earhart. She wasn't just a pilot. She was a meticulously crafted brand, a symbol, a movement wrapped in a leather flight jacket. Her husband George Putnam, a publisher with the promotional instincts of P.T. Barnum, had turned her into Lady Lindy, the female Charles Lindbergh. Every flight was a media event. Every landing generated headlines. When Purdue University handed over $80,000 for a flying laboratory, a gleaming Electra that cost more than most people's houses, it wasn't just about aviation. It was about proving women could do anything men could do, about pushing the boundaries of what seemed possible, about fame and fortune and legacy. The plan was audacious even by the standards of the golden age of aviation. 29,000 miles around the globe along the equator, the longest possible route. Not the safer northern passage, mind you, the equator, through monsoons and over jungles, across deserts and endless ocean. They'd already tried once, back in the spring, but Earhart ground-looped the aircraft in Hawaii, tearing up the landing gear. $50,000 in damage. The plane shipped back to California, rebuilt, another attempt organized. She wasn't flying alone. Fred Noonan, 44 years old, one of the most experienced navigators alive, would handle the celestial navigation and dead reckoning. The man had pioneered Pacific routes for Pan American Airways, guided planes across 18 trans-Pacific crossings. He knew the stars like other men knew their neighborhood streets. Though there were whispers about his drinking, he'd lost his Pan Am job. Some said because of the bottle Earhart specifically requested him. She needed the best, and Noonan, for all his struggles, was exactly that. By early summer, they'd conquered 22,000 miles, Miami to South America, to Africa, to India, to Australia. The world watched every leg, every landing, every triumph over mechanical trouble and weather. Now just 7,000 miles remained, but these would be the hardest. The Pacific isn't forgiving. It doesn't care about your fame or your courage or how many records you've broken. The Howland Island leg was always going to be the climax, the moment that would make or break the entire enterprise. You've got to understand something about navigation in those days. It wasn't GPS satellites and moving maps. It was Fred Noonan squinting through a sextant at the stars, measuring angles, calculating positions on paper, hoping the clouds would clear long enough to get a fix. It was dead reckoning estimating position based on speed and heading and time, knowing every minute you might be drifting off course. And it was radio direction finding, a relatively new technology that could help you home in on a signal if you knew how to use the equipment, if atmospheric conditions cooperated, if everything went right. The US government wasn't leaving this to chance. President Roosevelt himself took an interest. The Coast Guard cutter Itasca steamed to Howland Island and anchored offshore, ready to guide them in with radio signals. The Navy positioned ships along the route. Weather reports were gathered and transmitted. This was as supported as a civilian flight could possibly be. But here's where the planning started to fray. Earhart wasn't a radio expert. She'd refused to master Morse code, said she didn't have time to learn it properly. The Itasca was prepared to send continuous signals she could use to find them, but two-way communication required both parties to be on the same frequency at the same time, listening when the other transmitted, and they'd left behind the 250-foot trailing antenna that would have improved their long-range reception. Why? Weight. They needed every ounce for fuel. They departed Lae just after dawn, the Electra packed with roughly 1,000 gallons of aviation fuel, near its maximum weight. Noonan had the maps, the calculations, the flight plan. Earhart had her courage and skill. 18 hours of flying stretched ahead of them. 18 hours to find an island you could bicycle across in 15 minutes, somewhere in an ocean that could hide entire nations.
My name is Tom Sachs. I'm an artist in New York City. For nearly 2 decades, I have been collaborating with Nike.
Nike running is for runners. Nike basketball is for basketball. Nike craft is for everyone else.
The first few hours, everything seemed fine. The Itasca picked up radio transmissions weak at first, then stronger as they approached. Cloudy and overcast, Earhart reported. Not ideal for celestial navigation. Noonan would be flying partially blind, relying more on dead reckoning. At dawn, around the time they should be getting close, the transmissions became more frequent, more urgent. Cock calling Itasca. We must be on you but cannot see you. Check this out. She was transmitting but apparently not receiving. The Itasca was sending back continuous signals, trying to give her bearings, but their radio operators realized she couldn't hear them. It was a one-way conversation, and on the Itasca, trained men stood at their equipment feeling increasingly helpless. They could hear her signal strength increasing, which meant she was getting closer, but she kept saying she couldn't find the island. We are circling, but cannot hear you. Imagine that moment. You're flying over empty ocean, your fuel gauge dropping. You know you're close to your destination, but all you see below is water. No island, no smoke signals from the Itasca, no visual reference at all, just blue stretching to the horizon in every direction. Her last clear transmission came just before 9 in the morning, local time. We are on the line, 157-337, running north and south. This was a line of position and navigation technique, where you know you're somewhere along a specific line, but you don't know where on that line. She was telling the Itasca she was flying along a northwest-southeast line that passed through Howland Island, searching, burning fuel with every passing minute. Then nothing. The radio went silent. The Itasca immediately began searching, crisscrossing the waters around Howland. Within hours, President Roosevelt authorized what became the most extensive air and sea search in naval history to that point. The aircraft carrier Lexington steamed to the area with 60 planes. The battleship Colorado launched float planes that searched the Phoenix Islands. 9 ships covered 250,000 square miles of ocean. They found exactly nothing. No wreckage, no oil slick, no life raft, not a single piece of debris. It was as if the Electra and its 2 occupants had simply vanished into the Pacific sky. Now here's where it gets interesting, because when you don't find evidence, theories multiply like rabbits. The official conclusion, the one the Navy reached after spending $4 million searching, was straightforward. They ran out of fuel, ditched in the ocean, and sank. The Electra wasn't designed to float for long. A wheels-up landing on open ocean would have been rough. The plane would have broken apart or filled with water quickly. In waters thousands of feet deep, it would have disappeared forever. But people don't like simple answers to mysterious disappearances, especially when it involves someone as famous as Amelia Earhart. The theories that emerged over the decades range from plausible to utterly wild. Some claimed she was on a secret spy mission for Roosevelt, photographing Japanese military installations, and was captured when she crashed in the Marshall Islands. There were reports of islanders seeing a white woman and man, of graves on Saipan that supposedly held American aviators. The Japanese military records don't support any of this, but the theory persisted, fueled by Cold War paranoia and the romance of espionage. The more intriguing possibility emerged decades later when researchers started focusing on a tiny coral atoll called Nikumaroro, about 350 miles southeast of Howland Island. Back in 1940, a British colonial officer named Gerald Gallagher found something disturbing on the uninhabited island, a partial human skeleton under a tree, along with a woman's shoe, a sexton box, and remnants of a campfire. He measured the bones, sent them to Fiji for analysis, where a physician concluded they belonged to a stocky Polynesian male. The bones were eventually lost, but the measurements remained in colonial records. Fast forward to the late 80s. An organization called TIGHAR, the International Group for Historic Aircraft Recovery, took another look at those bone measurements using modern forensic techniques. The conclusion? They were more consistent with a woman of European descent, roughly Earhart's height and build, than with a Polynesian male. More expeditions to Nikumaroro found aircraft aluminum with rivet patterns matching the Electra, plexiglass fragments, tools, even cosmetic jars of a brand Earhart was known to use. The theory goes like this. They missed Howland, flew southeast instead of northwest when searching along their line of position, spotted Nikumaroro's reef, and put the Electra down on the flat coral shelf during low tide. They survived the landing, salvaged supplies, waited for rescue that never came. The plane was eventually washed off the reef into deep water. They passed away on the island dehydration, exposure, injury. The tropical climate and coconut crabs scattered the remains. It's plausible. It explains the bones, the artifacts, the lack of wreckage found during the immediate search.
Building a new product? Temez Labs takes you from napkin sketch to the App Store. Trusted by Fortune 500s for quality, security, and speed. Book your free strategy session at temez.ai.
But here's the thing. After more than 30 expeditions, millions of dollars in searching, sonar surveys, underwater robots, DNA analysis, and forensic investigations, there's still no definitive proof. The aluminum could be from any aircraft. The bones are lost, so DNA comparison is impossible. The cosmetic jars are suggestive but not conclusive. Years back, a History Channel documentary claimed they'd found a photograph showing Earhart and Noonan on a dock in the Marshall Islands, alive and in Japanese custody. Explosive stuff, right? Except researchers quickly discovered the photograph had been published in a Japanese travel guide 2 years before Earhart disappeared. The documentary was retracted, the theory debunked, but not before generating massive headlines. That's the frustrating beauty of this mystery. Every promising lead dissolves under scrutiny. Every breakthrough falls apart upon examination. The ocean keeps its secrets remarkably well. What we do know is this. Amelia Earhart and Fred Noonan made mistakes that day. She wasn't proficient enough with the radio equipment. They removed the trailing antenna that might have helped. Communication protocols with the Itasca were inadequate. The decision to fly at night, arriving at dawn when atmospheric conditions would affect radio propagation, created additional challenges. Noonan's celestial navigation, brilliant as he was, couldn't overcome overcast skies. They gambled everything on finding a tiny island in an enormous ocean, and they lost. On January 5th, 1939, Amelia Earhart was officially declared dead. Her estate was settled, her belongings divided. George Putnam remarried later that year. Fred Noonan's wife Mary eventually moved on with her life. The Electra was written off as lost. The world moved on to other headlines, other heroes, and eventually to another world war. But the mystery never really ended. Every few years, someone launches another expedition, analyzes another photograph, re-examines another piece of evidence. The fascination endures because it's the perfect unsolved puzzle. A famous person, a daring adventure, a disappearance without resolution. No closure, no confirmed wreckage, no remains, just questions. What remains indisputable is the audacity of the attempt. To fly around the world in a piston-engine aircraft with 1930s technology required extraordinary courage and skill. They completed 22,000 miles of dangerous flying through weather and over terrain that had defeated other pilots. They nearly made it. That last leg, those final hours, they were so close. Radio signal strength indicated they were probably within 100 miles of Howland. A slight course correction, a break in the clouds for Noonan to get a celestial fix, better radio communication. Any of those might have changed everything. Instead, we're left with that final transmission. We are running north and south. A line of position stretching across the Pacific, somewhere along which two people fought against fuel exhaustion and growing desperation. And then, silence. The kind of silence that echoes across decades, that launches expeditions and spawns theories, that reminds us how vast the ocean is and how small we are when we venture too far from shore. The mystery endures not because we love unsolved puzzles, though we do, but because it represents something larger. The price of ambition, the risks of pushing boundaries, the thin line between triumph and disaster that every pioneer walks. Amelia Earhart became more famous in disappearance than she might have in success, frozen forever in that moment of courage and uncertainty, somewhere between earth and legend. The thing about brilliant schemes is that they always end with handcuffs and bars, because no matter how clever you think you are, the house always wins. Now, if you enjoyed our show, tap that follow button and 5 stars in our ratings. Catch you next time.
Grab News. Thomas.